Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Glendale Historic Preservation Commission. Today is June 20th, 2024. It's 5:07. Meetings are broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/myglendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, iOS, and Android devices using a free app called Cablecast and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For program schedules, call 818-548-4013. For public comments and questions during this meeting, please call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. If you have any questions about matters on the agenda or requests for assistance, please contact the City Clerk's office at 818-548-2090 during regular business hours. May we have roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Commissioner Head?
Yes.
Commissioner Paul? Here. Commissioner Yurka?
Here.
Chair Cargnati?
Present.
And Chair Doom is either late or absent. We'll see.
The agenda for the June
Not Chair Doom, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Doom.
The agenda for the June 20th, 2024 regular meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission was posted on June 17th, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Let's review the minutes. Everyone have a chance to look at those? Did we have a motion to approve? Any changes?
I'll move.
All right. And a second?
I'll second.
Sounds good. Jay, do you want to do roll call on that?
My memory is we don't have to
Yeah, I
do
don't
that.
think so. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
We've gone back and forth over the years.
Until told otherwise, we'll keep going this way. Oral communications. We have one card.
Okay.
Alan Durham.
Could we just start?
Oh.
I wanted to introduce Ani to the
please.
public, and you guys have all met her, but we have a new planner who's joined us focused on historic preservation, Ani Minatsakanian.
Hello, Ani.
And we're very excited to have her. She comes to us with really good experience. She was most recently working as a planner or an associate planner for the city of Orange, doing a lot of historic preservation work there as well as regular current planning. And prior to that, she's had a number of different positions. She's got preservation experience with ARG, Architectural Resources Group, and Historic Resources Group. She has her master's degree from USC in heritage conservation. And she's got a lot of Glendale connections. She really loves Glendale, and I think Glendale will hopefully love her back. And she had worked for quite a while at the Museum of Neon Art as a curator and community engagement person, if I got that right. So, so welcome to Ani.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Jay. I'm very happy to be here. I always say that I grew up Glendale adjacent. I grew up in East Hollywood, and all of my friends were in Glendale, so I spent my childhood here. And I actually got both of my degrees. I studied at USC for undergrad in art history and graduate, as Jay said, in heritage conservation. But I drove to the Brand Library every night and studied there. And so if it wasn't for Brand Library and the architecture, I don't think I would be here today with the degrees that I have. So Glendale holds a very special place in my heart. And I'm very happy to be here. This is my first HPC meeting on this side of the room. So I'm hoping it all goes smoothly.
Good. Well, thank you. We're very happy to have you. Yes.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. Welcome, Ani. And I just wanted to say that several years ago, Ani and I were on a tour that the LA Conservancy put on of Lawrence Halpern landscapes downtown. And Ani and I were talking, and I think you'd recently finished your degree, and I was just so impressed by how much you knew. That's probably not original. This is, walking around, and so it's so wonderful to have you in Glendale.
Yes. Thank you, Ani. Welcome. It's working in the city of Orange. They have a lot of wonderful historical stuff there, so that's great. You've got a lot of good experience, I'm sure. Okay. Moving on to oral communications. We have one card. Alan Durham. We'll give you 5 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you. Chair Crignati, Commission members, thank you for letting me speak. I really have a couple of questions. First, I think the Commission members were going to schedule personal tours of Rockhaven, and I was just curious as to whether those had been completed or not. And my other question is, every time I go to Panda Inn, I look across the street and see the old Maryland Hotel. And it's always been there. I mean, I've lived in Glendale 30 years, but, you know, it's, to me, such a landmark. I don't know if it's really would be eligible to be put on the Register of Historic Places, but it was built in 1925. You know, it was announced several years ago that it had been sold and that it was going to be converted into apartments or residential above and retail below. It's got a very unique curved brick facade and brick patterning on the facade, and the original entryway, I mean, it's very much unchanged, for better or worse. I think for worse on the inside. But it sold a couple of years ago. You know, there's a notice posted on the door. It's closed, but nothing's going on. And it just makes me a little concerned the longer I see a building sit empty and, you know, and it's a redevelopment project supposedly and nothing happens. I'm always afraid it's going to get demolished. But I didn't know if anyone had any thoughts about whether it might possibly be eligible for listing on the register. There's not much of downtown Glendale left. I mean, old downtown Glendale. That's one of the few places. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Would you like to make a comment, Kathy? You started to reach your hand forward.
No, good.
Okay. Okay.
Let me
do you know
just
anything about that?
tell Mr. Durham, you could give me a call. There's good update news that I can share with you. So just give me a call early next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And it is eligible. It's identified in the South Glendale survey, so
Great.
just for everyone's sake.
Thank you.
So.
All right. Well, I'd like to open it up to board and commissioner comments. I know, Commissioner Yurka, you would like to say a few words? Want to start? Or do you want someone else to start? Okay. Why don't you start,
I'll go.
Commissioner Paul?
Just really quickly to answer your other question, yes, we did go to Rockhaven, so we did undertake that, and it was very eye-opening. Just from my own personal perspective, there was much more there than I realized. The last time I was there was on a bus tour, probably about 15 years ago, and it was good to go back and very enlightening to just see everything close up, including so many of those details that are left, down to that fountain and the Trabujo Rustico Faubourg woodwork, and the rooms. Just really, it was a really special trip, and I'm glad we were able to make it. I wanted to bring up something else really quickly, what I think is kind of a pretty well done preservation project in Glendale, and that is this coffee shop on 2111 Verdugo that just opened called How's It Going to End, which is a strange name for a coffee shop, but it's in the former Regal Dry Cleaners building over there on Verdugo, right before it turns downward in Montrose, barely in Glendale. 1957, they did an excellent job, and it's just a new coffee shop. I guess the woman who owns it used to own a coffee shop in Silver Lake called Dinosaur, but they kept a lot of the exposed beam work. The full it's a pretty vernacular building, kind of medium pitch gable, a whole front of glass that they fully restored, and they open it up. Really impressive job, and I would hope that, you know, more buildings along in that area along Honolulu or Verdugo would take note of just how good this building looks. You know, basically restored. I mean, they did a couple of other interventions. It was an architecture firm called Workshop, which I think does mostly new work. They added some gigantic boulders into there. They must have been like 4 tons each, but there's 4 or 5 boulders inside, and out. There's a little sitting area, but they did such a good job. And one only hopes that others, like I said, along Honolulu could see that and sort of see it as a positive. And it's crowded. So I just wanted to give a sort of a shout out to that owner. I think I met her once. I don't remember her name, but they did a very good job, and I would encourage everybody to just go see it, just to see what a good job they did. And I think she even kept the Regal Dry Cleaner sign, which is kind of funny. So it's not called, how's it going to end? I mean, they kept the red sign for Regal. So anyway, I just wanted to give what I think is in some ways probably it probably wasn't done first and foremost as preservation, but they ended up doing a really good job.
Great.
That's it.
Cool. Thank you. A coffee shop called Dinosaur and another one, how's it going to end? I wonder if there's a theme there.
Hopefully they cleaned up the dry cleaning fluid, or maybe that's answering their questions.
I'm sure the city of Glendale made sure they did that in the permitting process. Mr. Head, any comments?
About Rockhaven?
Any comments you'd like to make?
Well, I have a question about Rockhaven. Now that we've seen it, what are there next steps for us, or what do we do now that we've all seen it? Perhaps a second or third time.
Is that a J. Platt question?
Well, I think that's the first person I would look to, yes.
Okay, here I am. And with positive news once again. The city is working with a consulting team led by SWA Landscape Architects, looking at converting the Pines building into a museum per the grant that we got from Anthony Portantino's office through the state. We identified the Pines Cottage as kind of the ideal space on the campus to use for this. It had a new roof put on it recently. And so we now are working with SWA, ARG, and a museum consultant whose name is a few letters that I can't remember, to be honest. I'm sorry about that. And we've had several meetings. They've been on the site several times. But the real news is that on June 10th, we are going to have a community meeting at the Montrose Public Library. Sorry. July 10th, July 10th, which should be a Wednesday if you want to check your calendars to verify me. We're going to be having a public meeting. We're going to be getting the word out through all of the different community organizations, the City Connection newsletter. It's going to be up on the city website. I just got some nice flyers from the designers that we're going to kind of distribute on Monday. And the point of this meeting is twofold. One is to share what the project team is looking at. No decisions have been made or finalized, but there's a sense of how the Pines Cottage will lend itself to a museum setting, as well as how certain sections of it will lend itself for certain uses and certain for other uses. In addition to the museum, SWA has prepared a full ADA accessibility plan for the site that will be implemented using the grant money. The idea is that the whole site will then be publicly accessible, safely accessible, and the museum will be open to the public. What happens to the remainder of the site is still, we don't know what's going to happen there. The second part of the community meeting is going to be, once everyone's asked questions and gotten answers about the proposal that we're looking at, we're going to just open it up to the visioning and hearing what people's dreams and hopes and thoughts are for how Rockhaven can be used. We've been through that with lots of people over the years. That's something that I think you might have wanted to be sharing with us tonight. Our commission members are welcome to join for this hearing. And it'll be as citizens, but you can identify obviously as a HPC commissioner. The following week, we're going to council. So tonight, if you have any thoughts, those will be shared in any council report. The community meeting results will be shared in a report going to council. I know there's kind of a tight timeline there, so it may not be in the report, depending on how things go. And so the news is that this is moving along fairly quickly. There are some timelines associated with the grant that we have to meet. So that's why it feels a little accelerated. But we're definitely going to be having, future community meetings. So this won't be the last community meeting as part of this process, but it will be the introduction of where things are moving and how things look right now.
Do you have a time set for the meeting?
It'll be 6 p.m. to 8 or 8:30. We haven't finalized that. There's this community room at the Montrose Public Library on Honolulu Avenue. And in this information, I'll even share the flyer once we have it ready with all of you to distribute as you see. But we're pretty much good contact with most of the groups and people who've been interested in this, plus we'll take it even wider with all the resources the city has. So
What did you say? What was your last line? You'll take it what?
even further in terms of not just going to the homeowners groups and the historical societies and what you might think of as the usual suspects, but we're going to try to let as many people in the community know. The Glendale News Press is going to run a little piece about it. So, it should get disseminated pretty well.
Who's moderating the meeting? Who's running the meeting?
The city's running the meeting, and then the consultants will be making their presentations, and then there'll be a Q&A period, and then we'll have the open discussion.
The city meaning you, or I'm just
It's undetermined at this point. I'll be there.
Okay.
I'll be part of it. Ani probably will be there.
Okay.
Our economic development team is leading this, so it's likely they'll be running it. I think the director of community development, Bradley Calvert, will be there. So, there'll be plenty of city people there. Hopefully, we're not outnumbering the people in the community. So.
There's always that risk, although I doubt with this subject. Commissioner Yorka?
Jeffrey, did you want to say anything else? Oh, okay. So yes, it was great to be back on the Rockhaven campus, and I was glad to hear that it sounds like the new thinking about Rockhaven is that the nurses' cottage, which is identified as a contributing building, will be preserved as moving forward. So I think
That's a goal at this time, not a will, but it's definitely different than where we were 6 months ago.
Right,
so.
right. And, I'm very happy to hear what you've been saying, Jay, because I do, I have in the past shared the concerns of Friends of Rockhaven and the Glendale Historical Society, especially when I was really active in the Glendale Historical Society about the maintenance issues at the property. And I know we were having, kind of quarrel about what demolition by neglect means, because I don't think it has to be like willful or malicious. It's really, neglect is often not willful or malicious. It's not taking care of something, not paying attention to it. And, I think that it's good to see things moving on a kind of better course moving forward, and I'm just happy to see that we've got that money, that the time frame is kind of moving us along, and one hopes it'll be opened as an accessible museum in the not too distant future, and that the community will come together with good plans for what to do with the rest of this kind of extraordinary property. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the ongoing, although I think now it's stopped, unpermitted work at the properties that make up what we call sort of the phase complex. I know, Daniel, that you live in North Glendale, and I don't know if you had gone by and seen that one of the streamlined, modern, small retail spaces from which a longtime business owner had been essentially evicted, that it was just completely redone, new glass, new door, new storefront, new, I think, bulkhead, which was lowered, and all that was done without a permit after they had been given a stop work order on phase. And people from the community reached out to me, and I contacted staff and Artie and Dan, our council members, and there is a stop work order, and I hope that it's going to be honored moving forward, because it's bold to do work without a permit, especially on such a prominent location when building materials are falling down on the heads of people going to and from the farmers market. But it is just pure arrogance to resume the work without a permit and to make such substantive changes on really what, to my mind, is and was and still, I think, is the nicest little cluster of streamlined modern retail buildings in Glendale. And I did want to point out that the good news is that the canopy of Faze is being framed. So they were asked to replace that after it had been demolished without a permit. But I'm hoping, Jay, that it would be possible to take some measures to protect the glass and the doors while construction is ongoing, because there's nothing, doesn't seem to be anything in place at the present time. Thank you.
I have a quick question, and maybe one of you can answer this, or Jay. Is unpermitted work in Glendale considered illegal?
Yeah.
Okay. So if they did all this work without a permit, could there possibly be any mechanism? I mean, I'm assuming this building is not a historical resource, a listed historical
We're
resource.
treating it as it's a potential resource under CEQA.
Okay, good. So then, could there be, if it's being treated as a potential resource and what they did was illegal, I mean, could there be a city directive for them to return it back?
That's what we're asking them to do with the canopy. We've allowed some changes at the storefront based on historic precedent at the storefront of the Faze space. The space that Kathy was talking about is a different section of the building. It's actually, I don't even know what that history is exactly. It's more of an Art Deco building, and then Faze is more of a modern building tucked into the elbow of this L-shaped building. It's kind of strange. But we would like them to also bring back a door. The display window isn't significantly different, but Kathy's right, the bulkhead was changed, and so we will expect that to go back. The building is really, really intact in terms of its doors. The Faze building used to be Spanish Colonial Revival, so what we see today isn't, anything. We gave the owner the opportunity to consider bringing it back to that, but obviously decided not to, and I don't blame him ultimately. But we are going to allow the relocation of the main entry door into the new space at the former entry into the bank building that was there, the Spanish Colonial Bank building. The opening is still there, so we're going to have new doors there, and then have the current opening, which doesn't even come close to meeting ADA access. It's got a very strange sloping entry path. We're going to just seal that off, but keep the recessed display windows, which are an important feature of this whole group of storefronts.
So when the city chooses to treat a resource as a presumptive resource for CEQA purposes, does the city identify a period of significance with that?
Not necessarily, but we kind of, not formally is part of it.
I would argue that the modern facade of Faze is significant regardless of what's underneath there.
Oh yeah. We're treating the facade of Faze as the resource. The point I was making was if the owner wanted to do that, we might be able to make the argument that that's a restorative gesture. Then preservation, we are open to that sort of thing.
Okay.
But that's not going to happen. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on, everybody, we're good? Okay. Citing no old business, let's move on to new business.
That was it for Rockhaven?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just was expecting you guys were going to be sharing ideas about what.
I think Jay was inviting feedback.
I have,
and you,
I have lots of ideas. Yeah, I'm almost overwhelmed with the possibilities. Realistically speaking, that's another story. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is that when Jay and I were talking, the idea was to find a single tenant, someone to take over the whole, I'll call it a campus, the whole site. And that's been a really difficult effort, and people have stepped up and then dropped out, and there just hasn't been any activity with a single tenant. And so I started thinking about what if it were possible to have multiple tenants that were in allied sources or allied resources. So, for example, health-related. So, yes, there could be exercise, or yoga studio, massage, or could be a health kitchen, a working kitchen for people to learn how to cook healthy foods. And I mean, that's just one sort of thought. And then another thought was a school, like an applied arts school. And I'm thinking of the buildings, and it's like each building, this is just the way I think, is that each building could represent an art, metalsmith, textile, weaving, printmaking. It could be this. And again, my thought is that if it wasn't a single tenant like a school like Glendale Community College or a satellite campus for a larger school, that it could be possible to have tenants that are not necessarily connected, but still somehow form a community of these services or educational venues.
I see a rock house or a Black Mountain College West or something. So, yeah, those are great ideas, and we just need someone to propose and be able to make that happen. So,
yeah, and the thought too with these separate tenants is that they don't all have to appear at once. I mean, this is something that could evolve over time, and also if in the future it was a collection of different tenants, it doesn't mean that. I mean, ideally, that's what it would. If it became that, it would stay that way, but I think we may also be getting, and I say we, the community, may be stuck on finding a single tenant and what it's going to be for the rest of its life. And while that's nice, I don't know how realistic it is. And so I'm not suggesting an interim or temporary, let's see how this works out over the next 5 or 10 years, but allowing some flexibility and letting it evolve over time, I think, is an important part of it, too.
mm-hmm.
Thank you, Commissioner Head. Did you have something you wanted to add on? I saw you reach for your button.
Corner of,
Yes.
out of the corner of your eye. I've been very fascinated in thinking about the future of Rockhaven, about what role housing people might play there, because it was a medical and rehabilitation facility that housed people and that was dedicated to helping women who needed help. And I know that that prospect has been often controversial with the local community, but I think, I don't know if what the city is planning, what the city has planned for the parts that are larger open space where there is no development, and I don't know the degree to which development there, hopefully not a 5-story building, but could be leveraged against the money that needs to go into the preservation of the resource. And I know, like Jeffrey, what you're proposing sounds really great, and it in some ways reminds me of what was initially the city voted on for the site, and then the financing just couldn't work out. And so the concern for me is less the one tenant or the multiple tenants than who's the person who has the money to do this, because it's not Glendale. So I would like housing not to be written out of what we consider.
I don't think it ever has been. I know because we've gotten multiple proposals for affordable housing, including housing using the buildings plus new construction on the open space. We had a couple of drug and alcohol rehab facilities That to me always seemed like kind of a perfect reuse for the site in the spirit of Agnes Richards. And then, yeah, there are obviously community concerns about both of those. We looked at the possibility of putting a city library on the site, both right away when we first took over the site, and then more recently that was considered in terms of reusing the existing buildings for a new library, and that just didn't fly in terms of how libraries work today. But that's still not out of the question, I would think. But like Kathy said, as far as the city is going to go on searching for a user, but we expect that someone is going to have to provide the funding that's going to help restore the site and help maintain it on an ongoing basis, whether it's educational, which I think is also a great use for the site. It lends itself to that so nicely. And these are the types of thoughts that we're hoping. The community's been through this before, so a lot of people have shared lots of ideas. And until we find the person who hears those ideas and sparks their interest, or we get the RFP into the right hands, if we ever, I assume we'll be doing other RFQs or RFPs in the future, and we just have to find the right people. So anyone who knows anyone who could make use of a site like this, we should be hearing even wild ideas at this point. So.
Is the future always a public-private partnership, or is the city willing to sell the property to somebody that would obviously develop it knowing it's historic and the city would obviously have control over
I've never heard that the city has any intention to do that. I can't say that if we were to, we'd have to covenant the heck out of it and get it. It's protected on the National Register. We've always identified it as Glendale Register eligible, obviously, so it's always been treated as a historic site. I would rather have it be on the Glendale Register than the National Register, just because that gives us immediate protections rather than relying on CEQA level protections.
How does it get on the Glendale Register?
What's that?
How could it be put on there? I mean, can't the city nominate it?
The city could. The city, past administrations have chosen not to do that until we know what's coming.
Got it.
I think that's
That
what
sort of makes
spurred
sense,
the
I
community to do the National Register nomination. And that's fine. It's protected one way or the other. We're not going to let it, despite, there being a few maintenance problems, but we're not losing the site.
Right.
We're taking it seriously.
Okay. Commissioner Head?
Yes. Housing is, that's my preference, is to see it turned into housing, and really more specifically co-housing. And that just seems like it would just be really the most wonderful use for the property. Because of the sustainability, the sustainable nature of co-housing with shared resources, shared spaces, both public and private, for residents. It could allow for aging in place. These are all really important factors that the city and our community needs to consider, and it has the potential to be not just an example or a model.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that could actually influence other co-housing outside of Glendale, and I think that's also an important consideration.
I have a quick question for Jay. So Rock Haven's not listed on the Glendale Register at the present moment, correct?
Yes.
So if it's, of course, it's being treated as a CEQA resource. It's on the National Register. And this may be like just a general question that I should know, but I don't. If there's a proposed project at Rock Haven, even if it's not on the Glendale Register, whether it's through the mechanism of being treated as a presumed CEQA resource, or, well, because it's listed on the National Register, will that proposed project and any details associated with that proposed project come in front of us in the same way it would if it was listed on the Glendale Register.
Yeah, and forgive me, I totally screwed up on the dates before. This is coming to you on the July 18th hearing, and then it's going to council. So the July 10th is our public meeting. I can't remember what date I told you for the actual council hearing.
I think you said it was just the next meeting, I think is what you said.
Yeah, so it is coming to HPC on July 18th, and then it's going to go to council. So all of this is going to kind of come back, because you don't have the benefit of seeing the proposed plans for the museum or the ADA upgrades. So that's what the focus will be. You'll probably be seeing, if not the same, a similar presentation to what's being shown at the community meeting. I assume it may be brought even to a higher level of resolution by the time it comes to you. So
So when you say comes to us, as just a presentation or something we have to?
information and comment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Not something
There's-
we're voting on,
this is all schematic at this point. There's no decision making, but when it comes down to any decision making that needs to go to council, you'll be seeing it before council as an advisory body. So. But unlike other design review, you won't be the final design review authority because this is a bigger council issue, so.
And I need to apologize to my fellow commissioners and staff and to the applicant for the next item, but I need to leave early. So
Thank you for
Goodbye.
coming. You may be excused. Have a nice evening. See you next month. Okay, are we good with comments, or do you have more to say on?
Yeah, so, I mean, just in light of what Jay said, then, see you later. Then should we, in terms of, I mean, I just assume talk more about Rockhaven after I see the presentation. I mean, it's such a big item, I didn't really have any thoughts fully formed about what should happen with it today anyways.
That's fine. You would, you guys. The commission had shared with me that they wanted to use this slot of the hearing to talk about your ideas based on your visit. But yeah, you'll have many other opportunities to talk about it and share your thoughts.
Great. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Seeing no old business, we'll move on to new business. Item number 7A. 3235 Cornwall Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. Ani's first presentation. Yay.
Sorry. Alrighty. Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. The item before you today is Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for 3235 Cornwall Drive. 3235 Cornwall Drive is located in the Chevy Chase Canyon neighborhood of the city, east of Chevy Chase Golf Course. It sits on nearly a half-acre lot, and the residence is 1,506 square feet. The property was designed by architect Frank B. Wilson for Sylvia Porter. Pictured here is some of Wilson's work. Top left is Herschel Doherty's 1965 residence in Beverly Hills. And staff research also discovered that he designed the Plaza Motor Hotel in San Pedro over on the top right corner. He's worked on quite a range of different types of projects, as you can see from the variety over here. We wanted to include the Miraleste Estates down on the bottom left corner so that you can kind of see the size of some of the work he's done. Sylvia Porter is the original owner who lived at the residence through the 70s. It appears that she commissioned the house after a divorce and lived there with her son. Research does not indicate that Wilson, Porter, or subsequent owners were a person of significance or that any significant events happened at the residence, so the property would not be eligible under criteria 1 or 2. However, the property does appear to be eligible for designation under criteria 3 because it retains distinctive characteristics of modern post and beam design. The residence is accessed by a downslope driveway off of Cornwall Drive, neighboring other single-family residential properties. It's surrounded by mature landscaping and is only somewhat visible from Cornwall Drive and Linda Vista Drive. There is a seasonal stream that runs along the low side of the lot along Linda Vista. And this photo taken by staff is a view of the residence looking west from Cornwall Drive. These two photos show the downslope driveway to access the property, and this is to kind of give a sense of how the residence is nestled amid this lush, mature landscaping. The house is a modern post and beam style consisting of rectilinear forms. It has full-height glass panels, often shaped to follow the sloping roofline, large-scale concrete blocks that are integrated into the interior space at several locations. And you can sort of see that over on the right-hand photo with the ornamental concrete block that carries on into the living spaces, as well as vertical tongue and groove wood siding. The primary entrance is located at the west elevation. It's a recessed double wood slab door with side lights on either side. It's accessed by a flagstone porch entry that continues into the interior space, similar to the ornamental concrete block design I just explained. And the concrete blocks include a solid style and one with a repetitive ornamental pattern, and this is some great detail views of both of the concrete blocks. The primary roof has a very steep pitch and a short run at the north end that you can see over here on this left-hand photograph that establishes the ridgeline from which the remaining roof gently slopes downward. And you can really see that shape of the roof from the rear of the elevation. It's the east elevation. The roof covers the primary living spaces, and two flat roofs cover the bedroom areas to the north. They all feature wide overhanging eaves supported by exposed beams. At the rear elevation, there is a wood slab door and clear anodized steel frame sliding doors located under an exposed outrigger beam to provide access to the rear yard from the open concept living room and kitchen. There's also clear anodized steel frame sliding doors that provide views and access to the rear yard at the east elevation from the primary bedroom, so it really blurs the lines of interior and exterior spaces. There have been a few generally compatible alterations since its construction in 1969. The original carport has been enclosed at the south and west elevations to create an office, and you can sort of see in this top left photo that it's been enclosed over here. And the portion at the front of the carport was roofed over around the time that the carport was enclosed to create a new two-car carport. This plan from the Los Angeles County Assessor's records shows a little note that states lattice overhead. So it shows that there must have been something there that was trellised over. There are some photos which I will point out that it kind of is a little bit more clear. And this work has been done in a manner that is slightly differentiated from the original structure, using a slightly lighter stained vertical tongue and groove siding and black sliding doors. Also, the original storage cabinets that would have been accessed from the carport have been retained inside of the office space, which you can slightly see in this right-hand photograph over here. In this photo on the left, you can see the manner in which the trellis was roofed over, and it continues the sloped roof line. The enclosure of the carport and the addition do not impact the integrity of the property because the massing, structure, materials, workmanship, and design of the residence are retained. In the 90s, 7 skylights were installed, and skylights are often found on post and beam residences either as original or added features to provide more natural lighting without significantly altering the overall form of the residence. This photo on the right was taken from the interior of the office space. There was some sort of extended walkway added at the floor level, and at the direction of the commission, should work on this portion of the residence be included in the Mills Act, staff will conduct additional research and evaluate the appropriate treatment for this area. In addition, staff did note that some of the stones at the wraparound flagstone planter are broken, as you can see in this right-hand photograph. Also, at some point, siding that emulates vertical wood siding was added at the front elevation to box out the eaves above the entry area. The work is inappropriate and should be removed and restored to its original integrity. This is just a few different vantage points, so you can also see how it's been impacted from the interior as well. There is also a deteriorated outrigger beam at the rear elevation near the rear door, which should be repaired, which you can see over here on the left-hand side photo. Also, the current owner recently had roof installation installed on top of the roof deck. There is a current dispute between the owner and a roofing company. The quality of the work is not really ideal. You can see it from this close-up photo on the bottom right that it kind of has this snowed-in effect after the roofing work that was conducted. The material is tapered over the eaves to limit visibility from the ground level. But as we saw from the earlier photograph that shows the view of the residence from Cornwall Drive, the topography makes the roof of this property quite visible from different vantage points. So it's a little bit different than if we were on just a street level flat topography. So at the minimum, some of this work needs to be cleaned up, especially some of that overspray that we see on some of the vent pipes and roof flashings. Although there are some alterations, the property retains a high level of integrity. The architecture takes into consideration the surrounding landscape and exemplifies the distinctive characteristics of modern post and beam architecture. And that concludes my slideshow presentation. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Read the conditions.
Oh. Okay. And would the commission like me to read the recommended Mills Act conditions?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ani.
As mentioned, our eligibility finding is that the property is eligible for listing in the Glendale Register under Criterion 3 with the following recommended Mills Act conditions. Remove the siding box under the eave at the west front elevation above the recessed entry. Reglaze the fixed window openings that were once covered by this work to bring the area closer to its original appearance. Replace broken stones at the flagstone planter at the west and south elevations. Paint the eaves at the rear patio to match the interior finish color. Number 5 is repair the deteriorated outrigger beam at the rear east elevation near the rear door. And finally, remove the insulation overspray at the roof. If the owner's dispute with the contractor is resolved and the roof is repaired or replaced, the insulating material should have a darker color to more closely recall the appearance of the original gravel roof. Thank you.
Thank you, Ani. Does anyone have any questions for Ani before I open the public hearing? We'll deliberate and comment later, but if you have any questions, no? Okay. With that, we'll open the public hearing. We have one card. Our homeowner, Graham Wiffler, is here. Would you like to get up and speak with us, Graham?
Sure.
Great.
My name
Thank
is
you.
Graham Wiffler. I live at 3235 Cornwall Drive, and I am the owner of this property. And I want to thank everybody for considering my house for the historic nomination. I'm doing this, I'm asking for this historic nomination for 2 reasons: to protect the house in the future and to have it recognize and become part of the tapestry of Glendale's architecture. I think it is an architectural significant structure. I bought the house 30 years ago because it reminded me of my dad's works. And that's, it just felt right. And if you've seen my dad's work, you'll understand. The house has undergone very few alterations, miraculously. I have a question about the Mills Act. I don't know whether that is appropriate for me, and I'll take your advice on this. I bought the house 30 years ago at the bottom of the market. And I don't want to say what I bought it for, but you probably know. Anyway, I don't think the Mills Act will give me any funds, will pay me any money. But there are things I want to do, but I would have done them anyway. And number one, Eagle Eyes Jay saw it immediately when he came to the house, and that was that boxed over thing in front of, over my front entryway. That was done probably late 70s to mitigate roof leakage. So I'd like to do that one. That one's right now hanging on my roof. My roof I have problems with. It's in dispute. Yeah, I'll get it resolved. But yeah, I don't think, I'm going to go ahead and I'll fix the outrigger too. That's an easy Bondo job. But the things I'm going to do them regardless. And I don't know if it's a good idea to invoke the Mills Act at this time if it's not going to pay. However, the guidance I seek from you is down the line, when somebody else owns the house, if it is on the historical register, will they be able to apply for the Mills Act? And is there a way to make that as easy as possible for them, or set up some kind of precedent or suggestion or recommendation? I don't know. For me, I don't think the Mills Act is gonna do me any good. For the house, the historical designation will do the house a lot of good. And that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you, Graham.
Thanks.
I think before we start deliberating, do we need to know now whether or not he wants to follow through on the Mills Act portion? Or can we recommend to council that it get a Mills Act contract and he can decide later if that's something he wants to do?
Either way, it might be easier to just decide now, and if you need to reopen the public hearing, if you're closing it, and I'm not sure if the other visitor we have
We
is
don't have a
speaking.
card. Did you want to speak on this, Ma'am?
No, I'm here for the historical district.
Okay, great.
I want to listen.
Okay, great, thank you. So
Matt?
I have not closed it yet, but I don't have any other speaker cards.
Right.
So if you would like to address his questions, perhaps we can bring him back up and he can maybe make a decision.
Yeah, and we told Mr. Whiffler that people who've owned properties for decades tend not to get a substantial benefit from the Mills Act in terms of the percentage of property taxes saved each year. But generally, they do get something. So there would be some money off of your overall property tax. The good news, and I know we didn't talk about this, and I'm sorry it just didn't even come up, but the Mills Act runs with the property, not with the ownership. So not only will a subsequent owner get the Mills Act, and the valuation for the Mills Act will be revalued by the assessor at that time, bringing it up to full market value, which I assume will be significantly more than what you paid for it. Not only that, but it's also a good marketing tool in the real estate community, I believe, for some buyers, not all. But it's probably no worse than just being on the register. So, and I say that not meaning it's bad to be on the register, of course. So I see an upside benefit both for you now to some degree, and then in the future, for a future owner to be able to continue to get savings that could then be funneled into ongoing repairs for the house.
So to his other question, if it is on the register, but he doesn't get the Mills Act, when the next owner purchases the property, they would apply for the Mills Act. These conditions may or may not stand. There could be other conditions because with the property would then be completely reevaluated for the Mills Act. And if that's many years from now, there could be other things that have come up. So what I'm getting at is he wouldn't just give them this list and say, well, if you want to apply for the Mills Act, these are your conditions, right? Because we would reevaluate it entirely at that time.
If the property happened to be sold within whatever timeline you give the owner to fulfill the Mills Act conditions, the next owner would be obligated to fulfill that timeline.
My question was if he just does the register and not the Mills Act, and
Right,
the
no, I
next,
understand
but
that.
next owner wants to get the Mills Act.
Right, they would get a new set of conditions.
That's what
There
my
would be a
question
new
was.
visit by HPC.
He wouldn't just be able to say, here's my list from a disclosure standpoint. He would say, I tried, this was my list, but if you're going to try,
He
it'll
wouldn't,
be
he wouldn't
potentially a
even
different
have
list.
to mention it, yeah, so.
Yeah, I think he would need to mention that he tried. Or that he applied and didn't take it, and these were the conditions.
That's
But that
That's your
person
world.
potentially wouldn't have the same list, is what I'm getting at. So it could have some of these things. Any of the things you didn't do would appear on that list, I would expect. But in the time between now and when you do sell the property, other things could come up. The house will get reevaluated at that point. Staff will do a new report and all of that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If he chooses not to partake in the Mills Act, I don't see I don't see why these recommended Mills Act conditions would go over to another owner at all. It would be like the Mills Act didn't happen at all, right?
If the new owner wanted to apply for the Mills Act.
Right. But I don't think if he chooses not to go with the Mills Act, I don't think the conditions are codified in any way.
No, they're not.
The conditions will not apply.
Yeah.
Standard maintenance would be required if we ever learned that there were issues that were affecting the integrity of the Glendale Register property. We have code in place to help deal with that, but it wouldn't be as specific as this. For example, the deteriorated stone at the planter would likely further deteriorate, but we wouldn't know about that. We wouldn't have a mechanism to make it better.
I have a question. Can I ask him a question?
Do you mind coming back up, Graham? Thank you.
You mentioned in your presentation that you were going to be doing you would be doing a variety of things anyway, whether you received the Mills Act or not. What you were thinking about doing? If you did not get the Mills Act or chose not to embark in it for whatever reason, would you still be undertaking all of the items on that list?
All but one. And I have disagreement about that, and that's just the color of the eaves underneath on the outside, because I don't know I don't have no historical record of what they were originally. They don't match what's inside the house, but neither does the bedrooms. So it's kind of a hodgepodge, and I've cut the roof, and I've looked at the pieces of 2x6, and there's no way I could tell what was originally there. Very possibly could have been just stained.
But that one item which you would
so
not.
what I plan to do when I settle with the roofers, if it works out good, I'm going to take that box out. That's up above. That's probably the nastiest thing in the house.
But what I want to get at before we get off topic here is that one item that you would rather not do because you don't know the color. It's not a matter of cost that's stopping you from doing that one item.
Well, it would be expensive.
To figure out the color of the eaves.
Yeah,
To
it
repaint
would be.
them.
To repaint them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd probably paint them myself. Being
Okay.
If I may interject, we're not talking about color. We don't regulate color on historic properties. The only issue there is, on a post and beam house where the tongue and groove roof deck covers both the interior ceiling, and extends out to the eaves, in general, the same color carries from the inside to the outside, just as the decorative block that's on the entry wall extends into the interior. It's part of the conception of these glazed post and beam houses. We aren't saying that he has to paint it any specific color, but it is noticeable when you're there that the ceiling color on the interior is different than what's on the very much adjacent eave. And we were just suggesting that whatever this color is, or even a different color, be brought out to the eave. So,
Can I interject something? Since the Mills Act will go with the house, and there isn't a expiration date on the Mills Act, is there?
Contract, it's a 10-year contract, but it
10
renews
year.
every year, so it's always a 10-year contract.
Oh, so I think I would go for it.
Except that the conditions will have a time period put on them. You will be required to to satisfy the conditions within a certain period of time that we'll decide.
What period of
Well,
time?
That's gonna be discussed here.
That is what we will ultimately discuss
Okay.
when we close the public hearing.
Okay.
So that's more to talk about, and I'm happy to reopen the public hearing after we've had that discussion so that we can hear
Okay.
your
Okay.
interpretation of that.
ultimately, for the sake of just moving this along, and for this, thank you,
Yeah.
Graham.
Okay.
If you are interested in approving the Mills Act, you can do that since we have an active Mills Act application. if Mr. Whiffler decides prior to going to council that he is not interested in the Mills Act, he can withdraw that part. But we will still bring the Glendale Register nomination forward, which I think is something that he wants, whether he gets the Mills Act or not. And that's probably the easiest way to
Yeah.
proceed.
Okay, so I'll close the public hearing for now, and we will have our discussion. First off,
And yeah,
welcome, Commissioner Doom has arrived. Thank you for coming.
but he will not be participating in the vote on this item.
Because you missed the report, but thank you for coming.
I read it.
You read it. Okay, would anyone like to start deliberation? Commissioner Head, you were first.
I'll start. I really like the house. I'm biased toward post and beam and post-war modern. The stonework, the concrete blocks, and the decorative block, I think are just really wonderful. And I have not seen them in a residential. I haven't seen the pattern concrete and the block I have not seen in a commercial setting, so it's really, I'm sorry, I've only seen it in a commercial setting, not in a residential, and it works really well, and it's great to see. I think the roof line combined with the stonework really makes this unique and exceptional property.
How do you feel about the conditions? Did you see anything additional that you thought might be added? Is there anything on this list that maybe you don't think is of significance that's in the report?
No, I did a pretty thorough tour, and I had the list with me, and I went through that, and I tried to look for other things, and I really,
Great.
I think everything
Okay.
was called out.
Cool. Okay. Commissioner Paul?
Which block are you referring to, the herringbone or the other one?
Both.
Both, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I think it's really, and I like the story of the fact that you were drawn to this house through your father's work. I was able to look at the website a little bit. I really love the birdhouse. I wish that could be part of the designation. The birdhouse your father designed that's in front of this house is it's one of the most amazing mid-century modern birdhouses I've ever seen.
If I could jump in because it's so fun, his father's name is William Whiffler, and if you look him up, there's a nice website that I believe the current Mr. Whiffler put together, which is excellent, but some of the projects he worked on are amazing, including this one house that has a circular kitchen that's kind of mind-blowing, a freestanding circular kitchen in the main space under the post and beam roof.
Yeah, and so he taught
learning
at a
about
college.
these guys.
Amazing. So yeah, and I feel fairly strongly about this house being a Glendale Register property. It has some kind of weird 70s, 80s alterations going on, and it would be really nice if those can be sort of, some of them are kind of small. I think some of them are almost cosmetic. But I think looking at this recommended Mills Act conditions, I'm totally supportive of what's listed here. Let me just make sure. Is there a Mills Act condition for, there's like the 70s era skylights and the standing seam metal that was added on the steep pitched part of the roof? Is there a condition for that in there to restore that?
No, and I'm not sure that we know that that's an alteration unless your eye told you it was.
It's there's skylights that are if you go to an image of the pitch
on the
there,
steep slope
we
of the
just
roof.
saw it.
Yeah, one.
Nope.
right.
Nope.
back
They're on the. I thought there was another. Go to the picture of the roof
Oh,
where
yeah,
the
where you were
roofer
showing us
did
the
the poor job. I'll tell you when.
I think
Keep going.
Go to the roof at the beginning.
There we go. I cannot imagine that standing seam metal, and the thing is, this roof is very visible from the public right away. I can't imagine that standing seam metals from the early 60s, and those skylights in that are definitely from the 70s. And I think it would be nice to, I think the problem is we don't know what exactly was there before, but it would be nice, ideally, if there was a way to sort of put in a condition to restore this back to something more in line with what was probably there originally, or something compatible. I mean, a lot of times, if we don't know exactly what was there, there's options to do something that is in keeping with the character based off what we know of other mid-century modern houses of this era. And it certainly wasn't that standing seam metal with those 3 skylights. I mean, even if you want to keep some skylights in there for light, I think there's a more compatible way to handle this than what's presently there. And because the roof is so visible, I would like to see that as a condition if that was possible.
Okay.
Other than that, I think the house is fantastic. There's the other alterations are fairly minor, and even when they added when they redid the carport area, it was done very compatibly. And it's one of those properties that, in my opinion, just reads as a historical resource.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Paul. So, we are obviously in a position to, as you suggested, add conditions, modify conditions, eliminate conditions. The interesting condition related to the way the exterior eave color.
We don't have any, we'll just deal with it later.
The way the exterior eave color relates to the interior ceiling color. The interesting thing about that is, generally speaking, we don't take interiors into consideration when we're talking about historic register properties and Mills Act contracts and things like that. So it feels potentially disingenuous for us to put a condition on an exterior feature because of the way that it relates to an interior feature. I could see potentially putting a consideration on the contract that if those eaves ever get repainted or need to be repainted, that an effort be made to coordinate better with the inside. But I think that one could be eliminated as an actual condition, because I feel like I think we would be justified in separating that exterior space from the interior space. I get that it's a house full of glass, and you can see through everything, but truth be told, if all of the walls had been ripped out of the interior of this house and completely changed, we would still be able to consider the property to put it on the register, because it's not about the interiors of these homes. So I would be okay with just making that more of a consideration if it meant that the homeowner went forward with the Mills Act now, rather than leaving it potentially for a future owner. As to Commissioner Head's comments about those skylights and those windows.
Mine.
Yeah, sorry, Paul. Commissioner Paul, it's the four-letter words that get me. 4 letters in your names. I apologize. The thing that I always struggle with in this, when we're considering these types of situations, is the modifications that are made and how, whether they're distracting or maybe not great looking or whatever, is it easy to determine that they are a later modification and not part of the historic resource? When we ask for things to be changed to look a little bit more appropriate, we're potentially giving a false impression of what is the actual historic resource. The actual historic resource, if you look at those windows and you know anything and you're an expert in the style, certainly you're going to say, well, those aren't original. But if we go in and put a condition on this that he do something that's more compatible, we could be potentially confusing people as to what exactly the resource was. And I think certainly that's one of the things I struggle with a lot. We've had deliberations about properties, I'm going to go way back on this one, that have pools in the backyard. And some commissioners have thought, the pool does not coordinate at all with the house. My position has always been, well, it's, first of all, not an original feature of a house from the 1920s, and it doesn't have to coordinate, and in fact, it should almost look different because it isn't original. We should be able to identify the resource from the things that aren't the resource. So my hesitation or concern about the condition you mentioned is that while it might look better at the end of the day, since we really don't know what was there, I would be afraid of not really making much of a difference, except that, okay, yes, potentially it does look nicer. And I do think it's worth noting that while that particular facade is really tough to see from the public right-of-way. You really only get it when you come down the driveway. The only place, in fact, one of the things I think about when I visit a property, and it doesn't necessarily weigh on my decision-making in terms of recommendations, is how visible is this resource from the public right-of-way? And not having ever been up there, when I first parked the car, I thought, all I can see is the roof of this house. Like, what are we doing? But once you get down there, you realize that you actually see the house from Linda Vista when you're driving up, and it's actually really amazing with the trees and a creek maybe going in front of it. It's like super cool. But fortunately, that particular portion of the facade, which admittedly is not beautiful, is at least isn't what we're looking at. And I do think that we would certainly want to talk to the homeowner about whether or not that's even a condition he'd be willing to accept, because it does sound like that has the potential to be rather open-ended, especially since we can't give him a fairly specific direction. So I would hesitate to do that, to add that as a condition. Hopefully, once he's up there and that roof is getting cleaned up, there's an opportunity to clean that up a little bit, maybe with just fresh paint and some things like that to just kind of make it a little bit cleaner, because a lot of that does have to do with that the overspray of the roofing really is distracting and eye-catching in a way that I think draws even more attention to that area. So if we were to recommend, if we were going to recommend a Mills Act moving forward, maybe we could all come to an agreement on those things, invite the homeowner back up to see what he thinks about those, and then to Jay's point, we could still move it forward with the Mills Act, and he can decide later if he wants to do that. So my recommendation would be just to make number 4, the painting of the eaves, more of a consideration rather than a condition. I think that's mainly the sticking point for the homeowner anyway, and also because, like I said, I don't know that we should necessarily be comparing the exterior to the interior and having that make our decisions for us. And then maybe not, my position would be not to add that other condition. So that's my position, and I think we all should, obviously, I want you guys to comment on that.
Okay, so the reason why I see that roof, just as Jay, when he went there, noticed the fact that part of it was boxed in and that was incompatible and is something that should be fixed. I feel the same way about that. I think that sort of gesture of that steep pitched roof, it's a primary compositional element of the house. And having like the roof over here and doing this, to me, that is a signature. Modern, mid-century modern houses don't have a ton of ornament or a ton of decor or anything like that. So you're left with sort of these volume and massing gestures. I think that sort of gesture of that steep pitched element is a very important design element of the house. And my understanding, just from talking with the property owner and from seeing it in person, there's a really high likelihood that those skylights went in the 70s, and with those skylights, that's probably when that standing seam metal went in. We don't know what's under there. We don't know what was there originally, nor do I think we need to exactly know what was in there originally. I just think it's an incompatible change. I think the skylights can be done in a way that's compatible, but I think that standing seam metal is a little bit obnoxious on the house. So to get to your point, I understand what you're saying about, we don't want to do like mimicry of something, especially if we don't know. But nor do we also want to support keeping things that are clearly incompatible. And I do think this is different than a comparison to a pool. This is on the house, and this is on a mid-century modern house that was a primary gesture of the mid-century modern house. So I still see, and I didn't even notice the house, like you said, from the other street. If I get a chance to go to Wild Oat or whatever that cafe is, I'll drive by and try to give it a look. Cool. But I definitely noticed the house when I was walking down it. The first view you get, when you park the car in Cornwall, and even if you walk down the driveway a little bit, you see the house from the top. So that is how you're introduced to that house. And the first thing you see is the roof with kind of its funky snow work that she mentioned. But then you just see this cut with all this standing seam metal on it and 3 sort of bulky 70s era skylights. I accept if what I'm proposing doesn't make it into the Mills Act, of course I'll still support a Mills for this. I'll accept that, but I'm just proposing it as a potential condition because I do see this as highly visible, as staff brought up in their commission in their presentation. This is not like a typical flat roofed house where you don't see any of it. You see it, it's not I don't think it's compatible with what's there now. I think there's ways with some research, either to similar mid-century modern houses or what little we know by this architect, there must be a way to do something that is more in kind, even if it's not exact, to what the character and the period of significance of this house is. Okay. But it's like, either way, I would support a Mills Act for this.
Okay.
I could jump in on the roof issue. I didn't look at this and feel the way that you do. Standing seam metal existed at this point. In some ways, you want it to kind of come down over the rest of the roof so that you have a coherent form with the same material. The building permit for this house tells us it was a gravel roof. You couldn't put gravel on that pitch. I'm not sure what material you think might be more appropriate historically or physically in that location. But then I also just want to caution the commission. I hear what Daniel's saying, but to conjecturally put something else there when we don't know what it was just violates the standards. And our charge is to never violate the standards unless you think there's good reason to. You are allowed, this commission is allowed to make decisions that may not comply with the standards. That's in the code. But this is a situation where I would strongly recommend that we not do that unless we really had some good evidence. But I'm also just curious, Daniel, what do you picture here? Like a sheet metal material?
I'm wondering, I did a lot of research on a contemporary ranch architect who did a lot of similar work to this named Harold Zook Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And
he did things in Glendale.
Huh?
He has some things in Glendale. So.
Yeah. And so I had to write a whole context statement on contemporary ranch. This isn't necessarily contemporary ranch, but it's of the same era. And I'm wondering, I don't know, and maybe there would be an easy way to find out. Perhaps it's right under that standing seam metal. I'd be surprised if it was that. Maybe it was that standing seam metal originally, but I sincerely doubt it. But I could be wrong. But I'm wondering if what was on there was something akin to a very simple wood paneling, almost like a T111, which Harold Zook used quite a lot on all kinds of contemporary ranch houses. It was about something that was very simple and cost efficient, and mass produced. I'm not saying that T111 should be mandated, but sort of this vertical board siding was used quite commonly in a lot of his work and in a lot of contemporary ranch houses.
For roofing.
And for angles like this all throughout the house. On this type of roof, I don't know, but that's almost not a, that's almost more of a Claris story. Is that the roof? It's
shielding
kind of
the
a funny
interior from
element.
the elements. Yeah.
I can't imagine that was. I don't think it was the standing seam metal. It would be nice if there was a way to do a little exploratory work on it, but it could have been something more simple along those lines.
Okay.
Commissioner Doom would like to speak. He knows he can't vote, but he wants to make a couple comments.
Thank you. I toured the house, and from the interior, I was looking up at that era, and I asked the owner, because there's windows on the inside looking out, what was that object lying on top? It looked like some giant worm up there. Mm-hmm. And that is the air conditioning duct, heating and air conditioning throughout the house that was placed up there, probably right after the house was built. Mm-hmm. And the original sunlights were there. You can see them from the living room like they'd be up there. And I think the owner just extended that out and added those lights to replace the ones that you see from the inside, so you'll still get sunlight. Because if he had put that all enclosed, then you'd have these interior windows looking at nothing but darkness, and they light up because of the sunlight on the exterior windows. Now, are they tastefully done? Probably not, but was the stainless steel around in the early 60s? Yes. And I think when he cleans up the roof, it would look a lot nicer. And and you see it more from the inside, and I saw it walking in the driveway too.
Where the hammered gold-colored glass is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
If I may interject, I have that photo the commissioner is speaking about right now on the screen.
Yeah, so what we don't know is if those windows were once exterior
the
windows
exterior
and they were
windows.
boxed in later, or the other way around.
I believe these are original interior windows that were taking the light coming in from those skylights and then allowing it to transfer into the living room space. I believe I believe there was some sort of skylight there.
It's not possible that it was something more akin to what on the picture on the left top that was boxed in. It's not maybe something more akin to that where it was just an large overhanging eave where there was glass recessed.
Well, we can see that the picture on the right, the red arrow is pointing up to the infill of the glass panel of where the glass used to be in that boxed out area. And when you look at the other eave on the backyard side, it has the exact same configuration filled with glass. So I'm pretty sure all of these features, the boxed out part at the front was altered. This interior vertical laylight, I don't know what you call an interior window like that, does seem like it was a way to transfer light into the space from an original feature. Whether those are original skylights or not, I can't say. They didn't jump out at me
So what
as
I
a
was thinking
problem.
is maybe it was open, that beyond those windows was open air, but with an eave over it, similar to what got boxed in on the left side.
Because there's interior space beyond those, the three windows we're looking at here, there's interior space beyond those.
Now,
Yeah, always.
I see.
Those are that's the bedroom area, am I reading this correctly?
The upper level.
I think I'll open the public hearing. Maybe the homeowner has some insight. Come on up.
Yeah. I have plans. The only plans I got for the house was for redoing that roof section. I've climbed up inside there where the heating ducts are, and there is evidence along the far side that faces the exterior. There's evidence of a lot of water damage. So whatever they had there, it was leaking pretty bad. And the people that owned it, they didn't do anything, but they had to do this. I'm sure the shape of the building hasn't changed, but they did clad it with the steel, and they put in some other kind of windows. There were originally windows there. I don't know how they were done, but whatever they had done, it leaked because it was at an angle and it leaked. I just had an idea of how to mitigate it, because I really don't want to pull all that steel in the windows off there because I'm afraid of the same problem with leakage. What if on top of the steel did wood, say vertical wood, to kind of mimic the tongue and groove around the rest of the house, and then framed out those incorporated those skylights that are in there that are metal, which are not they're not from the 61, and frame those out so that they look like they had the same kind of wood framing as the rest of the house, kind of mimic it.
Okay.
And then that way it wouldn't
I hear you.
suffer from the leakage.
Yeah.
And
So,
over the street.
so we're getting, it sounds like, Jay, it feels like we're getting a little into the weeds on something like that, right? We don't generally get too far into design. This is a unique situation, but we don't generally get too far into the design of these types of things,
Right,
do
but
we?
if you're entertaining the condition, we have to a little bit. I recommend not entertaining the condition, so.
That's sort of how I feel. What about, I don't know, a consideration or a
We don't
nothing,
do
right?
considerations on Mills Acts. That's a DRB, that's a design review thing that we
Yeah, it's,
don't.
and I appreciate the property owner's sort of willingness and the spirit and intent of what he's proposing. And again, and we don't, you're right, we don't know what was original. I'm starting to wonder if it was this open wood frame and glass, there was some other, but maybe not.
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? But, okay.
Okay, so I'm
thank
going to
you.
close the public hearing. It sounds like, honestly, if anything happens with this space and it's leaking and he has to do some kind of modification, he's going to have to come to you
gonna
anyway.
talk about it,
It's
yeah.
it'll get worked out. Okay, so assuming that condition is not put on there, you know how I feel about the eaves thing, the painting of the eaves thing. Can you put the conditions back up for us again, Ani? Thank you. We're getting to the point where we need to entertain a motion that I'm hoping one or two of you will make. And, well, actually, I do want to reopen the public hearing one more time, if you don't mind coming back up, Graham. If the condition about the eaves, the painting of the eaves, was removed, are you okay with the other 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have more to do too. I have a deck to build and a whole backyard to redo, so,
Okay.
but that's, yeah.
Understanding that if you get this contract, you're going to be going through Jay for all of that. All of those extra things you want to do, right?
Well,
Us.
Well, sorry, both of them. You do know that, right? Any modifications you're going to be making in the yard and your decks and
really?
things like
Okay.
that, you're going to be going, all those modifications, just so you know. You don't get, as handy as you are, and I'm sure are great at it, don't just go to Home Depot on the weekend and install a deck.
oh, I was gonna put new windows in.
Okay, thank you, Graham. I'm going to close the public hearing again.
Yeah, I have a question, and this doesn't pertain to the list of conditions, and it's really more incidental because I'd like to get your opinion about and I'm not making any suggestions about the beam caps, but I was kind of curious what your impression was of the beam caps.
Oh, the things that were put on the ends of the beams?
Yeah.
I mean, I did notice them, and I saw them everywhere, and I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed them too, and we had, the property owner and I had a little conversation about this. I thought it was quite funky, and I don't know if that was original or not. I'm of two minds. I thought maybe it was like it could have been like a later quick, like maybe the beam was starting to deteriorate and it was like a very superficial way to weatherproof it by throwing something on. But then I also noticed, and Jay, maybe you would know this better than I do, I haven't really seen a lot of post and beam houses. There's like a weird detail going on with like the thin wood fascia, and then the beam the whole thing kind of overextends beyond the beam a little bit, and then there's this little wood face. There's a funny handling of the details there, and I'm wondering if the architect may have included those as some sort of compositional element to better resolve the fact that the beam is not flush with the eave directly above it. But I really don't know, but I did notice that it was kind of a weird, strange detail as well.
We saw the same thing when we visited, and Mr. Whiffler thought maybe it was an original feature. It doesn't quite look like it. I wondered if maybe the beams extended beyond the roof. Got cut because they were deteriorated. Because that's a typical feature for this kind of thing. So
Could be.
But yes.
Okay.
But it didn't bother us enough to recommend a condition. It just kind of is a little mystery. So.
Okay. All right, would anybody like to make a motion? Can just sort of read it from here.
Do we have consensus on the painting of the eave?
Yeah, I guess, do we have, well, when the person makes the motion, perhaps we'll find out if we do.
I would hate to lose a motion and have to do a revote.
Okay, so yes, do we have consensus on the eaves, the painting of the eaves, removing that as a condition?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
then you can,
I would like,
maybe Jay would like to read the motion and he can say so moved.
I think you can do that. Because we're only eliminating condition 4.
okay.
So you're approving with the conditions noted by staff, except for condition
So you
4.
read that,
Okay.
and then this part too,
Okay.
and then you would just say excluding condition number 4.
Okay. All right. I would like to make a motion that we follow the recommended action by the Historic Preservation Commission to support the subject property for listing as a Glendale Register property. And in addition, staff recommend that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that the property at 3235 Cornwall Drive, to be called the Porter House, be listed in the Glendale Register of Historic Resources based on the findings in the staff determination. Staff also suggests that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend that the City Council authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract with the property owners for property tax savings with the conditions noted except for the deletion of condition 4. Shall I read all the conditions?
No.
Okay.
Just say, yeah.
Great. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Commissioner Paul.
Yes.
Chair Craignotti.
Yes.
And Commissioner Doom arrived after the beginning of this hearing item, so, but it probably offers moral support.
Yes.
So-
Thank you. Awesome. Motion carries. Thank you, Graham, for coming tonight.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Item number 8, community development updates. 8A, update regarding status of pending and proposed historic districts.
And we have a speaker on this
Oh,
item.
terrific.
I don't know if you want to go there first or after the updates.
Would you like to hear the update first and then speak, or would you like to speak first? Okay. Jay, we'll have you go first. Or Ani, one of you, go first. Thank you.
I've got this one. Okay, so as the commission knows, as many of our community, as the commission knows, and many members of our community know, we have several historic district applications in various levels of processing. We have not been able to get to those as quickly as we've wanted to or said we were going to. I've kind of had this shifting, hopeful schedule. I can't say I have anything better than that tonight, but I do have, this is much more realistic based on some new information that I think will be of note and of positive interest to the commission and the community. So the first, so basically just to lay out what is ahead of us, we're in progress on the proposed Bellhurst Historic District nomination, which is an older application that's being processed under our old kind of historic district rules in terms of the procedure to get designated. Right now, the draft report on the district, which means the narrative portion, kind of the context of the district, as well as the survey forms for each property in the district. We returned that to the consultant a while ago with significant edits. And then we had not seen at that point, this is the district, you might remember, that there was interest in the community to possibly expand the district, but that interest was shown after the commission had already kind of nailed down what the boundary and scope of this district was. So when we went to the consultant, we asked them to do a kind of a rough survey of what we're calling the extended Bellhurst area to see if it would qualify as a potential expansion of the district. The good news is that that was found to be a possibility, but I haven't seen the full report for that section yet. If the people who are living in that area want to move forward with an expanded district, that will be another kind of application. It will be accelerated because we already have all the information, plus we have our new accelerated streamlined designation procedure. Going back to the actual Bellhurst area itself, I spoke with the consultant the other day. They're hopeful to give me the draft next week, but they're being realistic and saying it could be the week of July 1st. Once we get that between Ani and I, we're going to give it as quick a review as possible. At the same time, we're going to start scheduling the community meeting and preparing the materials for the community meeting. So I'm hopeful that that community meeting could happen in August, September. Let's just throw that in there. But we'll have all the materials prepared in the next few weeks. We'll be ready to roll with that. We're going to have the meeting here, so everything's kind of set up. And so that's for the Bellhurst district, which has been it's been years since that nomination came in. Something we haven't talked about that much, I've mentioned it a couple of times for the commission, is that the city council authorized the community development department to begin preparation of the next phase of the citywide historic survey, which means the East Glendale area, the West Glendale area, which is everything from the freeway, the 134 freeway, to the beginning of Spar Heights. So it's Verdugo Canyon, south, hillside areas, canyon areas, everything west to east that's within the Glendale boundary. And then we also asked to add on doing a survey and a context update for North Glendale. Because years ago when we did the North Glendale Community Plan, we did a staff-prepared context, which isn't quite as robust as the context, for example, that we got for South Glendale. So we want to update that context just to make it consistent in terms of its form and its overall direction, especially in terms of identifying property types and registration standards for things that are that we look at based on the community or the context, the existing context. So we sent out an RFP for an east and west survey and context, and then we asked for a second bid for a North Glendale context update and survey. Once those three things are done, which is really two things because east and west we're looking at as one entity, we're going to have a citywide survey because we'll have South Glendale all the way up to the San Gabriel Mountains. So it's pretty exciting that in the next few years we're going to have the entire city surveyed. We are hopeful to take a request to City Council on July 16th to authorize entering into a contract with one of the bidders we got from the RFP. So we've reviewed the RFP proposals, we've selected a staff preferred bidder, and we're going to bring that to council hopefully on July 16th. And if they are inclined to approve this, which they've already directed us to do, and we have money that's been directed to this community development budget. Most surveys in the past, we've had to take funds from the general fund. This is money that's already been put into the community development budget. So that will hopefully make this a little easier to move forward on the funding level. But we're also going to ask council to authorize us to, if they agree and we select a preferred bidder who we'll work on getting a contract with, we're going to ask them if that very same consulting team can do the surveys for the Verdugo Woodlands Historic District and the Cleveland Knolls Historic District, our two proposed districts. I think we're going to save a lot of time and money by having this consultant team, which is already going to be surveying these neighborhoods looking just as you would for a regular survey, take the extra time to look at the two districts. So there will be a cost and time consideration, but I think because they'll already be in the field and the other work is going to be done, I'm hopeful that it's not going to be a huge add-on budget-wise. We're going to hopefully have a number for council to entertain, even if it's a rough number, so they have an idea of what they're looking at. So anyways, July 16th is our tentative date for council. If we can't make that date, we're going to go in August. There's some open slots in August, I believe. And that will keep us on track with the schedule that we put in the RFP, which is amazing if we stay on that schedule. So that kind of changes how we're looking at the Verdugo Woodlands or Selves de Verdugo, however you want to call it, and the Cleveland Knolls District, because we're going to have, under the new kind of procedure for historic districts, we're having a combined community meeting and HPC hearing, which means that if we keep to our regular HPC schedule, we have to make sure we have no other items on the agenda. So I've put out a call to my colleagues to just make sure we don't have any design review cases coming up in August or September, because then I'm hopeful that we can we'll still have an HPC meeting, but we'll augment it with the community meeting, and we're going to figure out the details of how to structure that. You guys may not be sitting on the dais for the community meeting. We'll just be sharing information more informally. And then we're going to segue directly from that on the same evening into the HPC hearing. If HPC believes that the materials that we have in the applications suggest that these look like possible historic districts, and you think there's enough information there, which staff does think is the case, they will then by code become pending historic districts, which means that the historic district design guidelines apply, and there's kind of an extra level of protection within these neighborhoods, which both of them have been waiting now for a while to get in the queue for this. And then in terms of the timing of when the survey would happen, we'd have to work that out with the consultant, whoever City Council approves as a consultant. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to stick to the timing of the new streamlined designation process, partly because we'll be eliminating the period where we issue the RFP, review the bids, and write a contract and do all of that work. So I'm hopeful that we could even be faster in getting those surveys done than if we followed the regular streamlining. But if that's not the case, I think it's still much better to get the full survey consultant working on the historic districts as well, because there's so much overlap in what they're going to be looking at. So that's my update for you. I know it's a little convoluted, but there's a lot going on, so.
Okay. Do you have some questions?
Jay, I have a question about the pending status that you mentioned. Would that impact the permit application process for homeowners?
Well, it changes our design review, where we use we use the Historic District Design Guidelines as our baseline document to review changes instead of the citywide design guidelines. So it will change things in terms of our review, our interaction with the property owners, what they need to provide for us, the kinds of changes that we can easily make at staff level versus the types that might have to come to the commission, for example, or go through administrative design review. So it's a significant change, but basically HPC becomes the design review authority for a pending district, and the district design guidelines replace the citywide design guidelines for a pending district.
Got it. Thanks.
Jay, you talked about the community meeting that would also be the HPC meeting. Is that looking in August or September?
Well, we have the two districts, so it could be both. It could be, what did I write here? For Verdugo Woodlands, I'm tentatively throwing out August or September, and September or October for Cleveland Knowles. We'd like to move them forward close to each other, so.
Okay. That's right when school starts, I'll be here.
Okay, good.
I won't be here for August, but just FYI. I was going to tell you that later, but he brought it up now.
Okay, well, I'll be checking with all of you before we nail down any dates to see.
With that, I'll open the public hearing.
We'll move forward as long as we have a quorum, so.
I'll open the public hearing. Mary Copley, would you like to come up and speak? Hi, Mary.
Thanks for letting me wait. It kind of went from just a question to a thank you for moving forward the pending districts. And since our district, Cleveland Knowles, is going to have to wait, it sounds like, till September and October, does that mean any construction can just be whatever it wants to be as long as it meets city regulations? And does it have to be mentioned in potential real estate contracts yet?
Oh, that's a good question. It's not technically pending.
I know it's not pending now,
It's
but when...
not technically pending. It might be a good idea on a disclosure to mention that there's the potential that there's an application out there.
Right.
It might be a good idea. If that's it, and the form specifically asks if it's in a historic district or if the property is itself historic. The answer to that is vague in that case right now. You could say no, but in another place on the disclosure state that there is an application for a district, or you could say yes, there's an application for a district that's working its way through.
Okay, well, I'm for the district, so anything you can do to keep it moving,
Yeah.
I'd appreciate.
Great.
Thank you.
Right,
Thank you,
and in our design review, we're aware that there's an application that is pending for deeper review. I shouldn't use the word pending because it gets confusing.
Right. Right.
But by law, we have to stick with the citywide design guidelines. I don't think we've seen 1 or 2 applications in your neighborhood in recent months. I don't think much more than that.
Okay, good.
So,
You know, it seems to go in waves.
Trying to get in on there,
Right.
under the wire, right?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
maybe we shouldn't publicize this.
Yes, let's, hopefully those people aren't really watching this meeting. I don't know. Those people, shame on me. Folks like that. Okay, with that, I think we're adjourned. Yeah, Jay? Sound good?
Yes, we're adjourned
Okay.
at 6:50. Thank
6:50.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.